Hello, good morning, just about. My name's Zach, welcome to the Indeed Unplugged Public Sector stage. I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce Matt Burney, Strategic Advisor for our next session. Matt will be talking to us about navigating change and leading the workforce of the future. Clearly a critical topic for everyone involved in public sector and talent leadership. So please put your hands together and welcome to the stage, Matt Burney.
Thanks, Zach. Good morning, everybody. God, that's low energy. Good morning. Way better, thank you. I know it's a bit warm, so bear with us, but I do want to talk to you about some really quite important stuff today. There's a lot of strategy, tech, transformation talk, all that kind of thing that's going on today, but I think we also need to bear in mind that with all the stuff that we're hearing about AI and automation, there is a very human story behind all of this that we really should be paying attention to. And we should start thinking about the impacts of what we do when we start changing organizations quite as fundamentally as we're seeing at the moment. Very recently, we did some work with YouGov to go and actually start looking at opinions behind what's going on at the moment. And what we found was surprising and pretty sobering, if I'm honest. It shows that there's a really powerful divide that is happening within organizations. And it's not big and it's not loud and it's not something that's being shouted from the rooftops, but it's very real and it is there for almost everybody in the workplace. So what we're going through at the moment is not just about navigating and managing change. It's about helping people navigate through that change and making sure that they do that in a way that they feel included in. As you can see from the data here, this is a pretty big study and it was done very, very recently. This is about as fresh as data as you're going to get, but it's a good sample size and we made sure that this was as robust as we can. At the end of this deck, there is actually a link to go and download the full report. And if you'd like to go and have a look at that, I would suggest you do. There's some really great data in here, and there is actually a specific public sector report as well. So I think what we're seeing at the moment is that there's a growing gap between leaders and employees, and that's a gap that's been emerging for a while, and it's getting more and more obvious. Innovation's really, really rapid at the moment, and that's great, but I think unity and shared direction are things that we are, to an extent, losing. So some of the goal of what we're going to talk about today is to reunite leaders and their teams, leaders and strategy, the execution of that strategy, and hopefully bringing back some of that purpose and productivity that we all crave from the workplace of today. There's been a lot of noise. I'm really not used to not having a screen behind me. I like pointing to things. But imagine I'm pointing at the screen behind me. But I think there's been a lot of noise at the moment, and you've probably seen this figure, that 8 million jobs are going to be at risk in the UK if government doesn't do something. Well, yes, that's something that's been put out there. I'm sure everybody's seen it on the cover of a newspaper or in a website, and lots of doom and gloom around that. But in reality, that's not the sole future. That's part of the Institute for Public Policy Research's forecast document. And it's one of 3 scenarios. And it's not necessarily the one that's going to happen. It's something that could happen. Crucially, it's not a forecast. It's more a scenario and it's the most extreme. So we really shouldn't think of this as just a story about technology causing problems or making wholesale change. This is more a story about leadership and transformation. The real risk here isn't in automation, it's how we manage that transition over to an automated and AI-driven future. We have a choice. Do we allow automation to deepen divides, or do we use it to narrow those divides? Upskilling people, reskilling people, engaging people in the process, that's what we should be doing. So the message here isn't doom and gloom, it's more about responsibility. I think with the right planning, the right investment, we don't just reduce the risk, we actually can mitigate that risk if we try really hard. And I think we see this a lot. It's the fairly standard image that we'll all see. Again, I'm going to the screen that isn't behind me. But we see leaders that are very focused on AI and transformation, and they're giving these great policies out, and they're talking about what their future looks like. But in reality, the other side of things, which I think we can probably all relate to, a lot of employees are seeing unclear goals, higher stress, and change that feels imposed on them, not change that has actually been part of their process. So we need to think about how do we reunite those two sides of the workforce and make sure that we're bringing people along the journey. And this is something that is right the way across the board. As part of the study, we actually looked at different sectors, the public sector being one of those, and this is the specific data from the public sector around the importance of AI in organizations. We can see really clearly that leaders believe that AI is massively important, whereas regular employees and to an extent HR decision makers are almost saying the opposite to what their leadership is. That's a really worrying gap and one that we need to address. If we look at the gap between managers and employees, 60% of managers, they say they feel supported. That's great. I'm very pleased for them. But if you're an employee, it's much lower. It's only 40% of employees. That's a worrying gap. And I don't think that's resistance. I think that's kind of a natural response to disconnection that people are starting to feel. A lot of people feel prepared, and this all looks on the surface of it very good. How prepared do you feel for your job? Great. 93% of senior leaders feel prepared for their job. 87% of employees, great. How realistic is that in the face of technology change right now? Does everybody in this room actually believe they know what their job's going to look like in a year's time? In 5 years' time? In 10 years' time? I doubt anyone in this room has any idea what their job looks like. I doubt most people in this room know what their job's going to look like probably by the end of next year, because the pace of technology change is incredibly rapid, and it's coming down the pipeline very, very fast. And there's also that gap between feeling prepared and feeling supported. You can feel as prepared as you want, but if you're not supported to go and achieve your goals at work, then you have challenges. And what that leads to is that feeling of, I don't have a good work-life balance, my workload's gone up. I think everybody in this room would probably say work-life balance has gone down in the last couple of years. We've all talked about, great, there's new technology, there's AI, there's automation, there's all sorts of stuff. Who here is actually doing less work as a result of the automation that's come in? Still waiting for one person to put their hand up at any time I've done this. But it's amazing that we've added all this technology and we've talked a really good game about saying that technology is going to improve our processes, it's going to improve our lives, but actually the reality is we've all seen workloads go up and work-life balance go down. But this isn't just burnout. I think we talk a lot about burnout, and burnout's an important thing to discuss, and it's an important point to raise, but I think more importantly is something that Rebecca Levitt, who works with the LMA, mentions a lot, something called rust out. It's more that time where you feel disengaged, you don't feel like you've been brought along on the journey. So you kind of lose that engagement, you lose that trust, and you lose your enthusiasm for what it is you're doing because you've not been brought on the journey. And I think that's, if you're a leader, something you really need to address. If you're feeling it, your employees are definitely feeling it. So really focus in on what matters to people in the workplace. It's quite simple, really. People just want clarity, security, and inclusion in that journey. That's all anybody would really ask for in the workplace these days. Leaders tend to prioritize things like skills, but actually what do employees always ask for first when we survey them? If you ask a leader, they say skills. What do you really want? Is no one going to say it? It's pay, yeah. It doesn't matter what we do. We've done millions of surveys over the years that I've been working at Indeed, and pay always comes up as the number one thing. Now, that isn't to say that everybody needs to go out and earn £10,000 more. We'd all love to, let's face it. But we know what we want, and we know what we should get paid in the market, so that's important to us. Once we have that, and we know that we're getting the right pay rate, we can start engaging with the job. So we've got to make sure that we focus in on those things. We've got to prioritize the right things for the right people. But the other thing that people want alongside pay that didn't rank as highly in previous years when we surveyed it was job security. People feel like job security is a real worry for them right now, particularly in the face of automation and artificial intelligence coming along the pipeline. And this isn't about resistance to change, but it's a lack of context and a lack of involvement in the process. Leadership has a tendency to think it's communicating really well. I think we've probably all experienced somebody who communicates things down, they cascade wonderful strategies, they'll have town hall meetings, they'll tell you all these wonderful things, lots of emails have come out, but it doesn't always lead to connection with the employees. If you've only got 40% of employees feeling supported, when you do these things like talking in a town hall about your automation strategy and things like that, does that actually cascade to the people that need to hear it? Or does it feel something that is maybe a bit performative or something that's been enforced on those people? Communication needs to be really clear, really relevant, and really human when we're enacting big change. And leadership is more about translating that strategy into meaning and being meaningful. I think if anybody here has ever seen me speak before, you'll know that I'm a big advocate of artificial intelligence in the workplace. I'm a great believer that the change that we're seeing now is pretty fundamental. As Sundar Pichai has said at Google, this is as big an invention as electricity or the wheel. And a lot of people might not believe that, but I think it is that fundamental for all of us. But adoption isn't the same for absolutely everybody. We need to be really conscious of that. Senior leaders use AI way more than employees do. And there is a real sentiment gap here. There are productivity gains, absolutely, but the vast majority of employees actually think there are serious job security issues here. When surveyed, people are actually saying they believe they might lose their job. Now, that's not great, and leaders should actually be very clear about what is going to happen to your job. If automation is coming, great. How does that enable you to do more or be better or engage more purposefully with what it is you're doing for a living? If we're not communicating that, it leaves people to think, I might be out of a job in relatively short order. This is a trust gap, it's not a skills gap. So if you're enacting policies, making changes, start talking to your employees about how, when, and why those things are happening. And if there is a point where you're going to say teams are going to get smaller, well, be honest with people about that. Help them find other opportunities in your organization, because that's what we should be doing to be responsible citizens. If we look at AI adoption versus what people are saying, there is a real problem brewing in the public sector world. So, if we're looking at where AI is being used right now, employees are saying, they're at about 38% are saying yes, but the rest of the usership there is pretty low. You can see here that senior leaders and HR decision makers are doing much more usage of AI. So I think it should be one of those things where we communicate that strategy down, we make sure people are actually engaged in it, and we're doing the right thing to ensure that people are given the tools they need. Because when we use AI in the workplace, it really does improve things. If we look at this in recruitment, it improves things like resume screening, chatbots, all that kind of stuff, CV writing, job writing. These are all really, really great use cases. And 90% of the people that we surveyed said that AI improves their process. But most haven't embedded it fully. With a lack of purpose and transparency, it fuels skepticism. And AI needs to be paired with trust, training, and intent. I think training is a really important piece here, because if we look at employees, These are the things that we need employees to have. Digital literacy, adaptability, and communication. They are vital to making somebody successful at their job, and they're vital at allowing somebody to understand the new technology that's coming in. The UK has the lowest digital literacy in Europe. That's a pretty shocking statistic. We have about 8.4 million people who are digitally illiterate in the workforce at the moment. There's about another 12 million people who say they need additional help in getting onto the internet. That's pretty worrying because that shows that we've got an underinvestment and that we're not doing enough to bring people along. Post-COVID, we had a real downturn in the amount of investment that went on in training. 1 in 3 firms in the UK said, we're no longer going to do training, and they didn't bring it back after COVID. So we have low attainment, we have low digital literacy, and we need to think about the skills that people have differently. I actually think we should be thinking of this as infrastructure, not just infrastructure in your organization, but this is like national infrastructure. We need good policy around this to ensure that we have great education standards and that we're bringing people along on this journey. It's not just an HR side project to train people to be better at their job and give them opportunity. I think when we look at what's going on across the board, though, we know that workloads are rising, meaning is in decline for a lot of people. And that's pretty sad because I really love my job and I enjoy getting up and doing it. And I hate to see people who are disengaged in what they're doing. So we want to make sure that meaning is still there for everybody. People are doing more, but they feel less impact on what they're doing. And that's possibly because we're trying to do things without giving them purpose that drives engagement, gives them retention, and provides resilience to those people. We need to anchor work in meaning. And if we're honest, we've not necessarily done this the right way in a lot of instances. If we look at what's going on just in the world of HR and recruitment, if we're honest, we know that other functions have done this quicker and more effectively. A lot of other functions have modernized quicker than HR and recruitment have. If you look at finance, you look at marketing, there's a lot of tech that's been adopted very quickly. And to be frank, a lot of us in recruitment said, we like the shiny toy, and we ran off and went, we've done AI. And we kind of hadn't really done AI, we just sort of played around with it a little bit and probably talked to some conferences. But really, we need to step up now. This is a really great opportunity. There are some huge barriers that we face, though, and we need to be good at communicating those to people in our businesses, our leadership teams, and those around us that work with us. We have those problems of economic uncertainty, under-resourced teams. I think I'm 26 years, it was my birthday yesterday, by the way. I've been 26 years in recruitment, I think, this year. It was 50 yesterday. It's really worrying. Thank you very much. You can all sing happy birthday at the end. But I think in the 26 years that I've been in recruitment, every year I've heard somebody say, yeah, I'm being asked to do more with less. And it never goes away. We are always an under-resourced function. But if we can talk better business, and we can talk about these economic barriers, the internal communication, and the lack of resources that we've got, we'll get better. Poor communication goes both ways. We need to get better at talking to leadership, and leadership needs to get better at talking to us. Talent needs to be positioned as a strategic engine, not just a support role. Everybody in here does a really fantastic job making sure that organizations run smoothly and well, and that's a really difficult thing to do. And we need to articulate that value much, much better as a result of what we're doing here. When we think about the implementation of technology, we should always remember that when we look at things like AI, it's not a magic bullet, it's not going to solve everything, but what it will do is probably shine a mirror up in front of you, allow you to go and look at what's going on here. It's actually going to tell you what the opportunities are. And I think we should all think about shifting focus from old CVs and the old style of job ads that we write to capabilities and realigning education to make sure that we've got the right people joining businesses. Think about skills-first hiring as a really important cornerstone of what it is we do here. Innovation is still experimental in a lot of organizations. We're typically pretty low on the tools usage. We all know that tools exist, but strategy and readiness tend to be a little bit lacking at the moment. And if we look at where we are in terms of AI usage, a lot of people are using it for things like admin. They're looking at things like rewriting job ads, shortlisting people. All of those are really great ideas, but they're the start of it. And we're spending too long in the kind of drudgery area on this graph. And we're not thinking about planning and performance. We should be thinking longer term about what can this technology do for us to get much, much better at the strategic side of what we're doing in HR and talent. The problem isn't tech, it's kind of systems and cultural readiness. So we need to shift from convenience into kind of competitive advantage. Employees want transparency, not perfection. And a lack of clarity leads to a lot of fear and a lot of disengagement. Communication needs to be ongoing, honest, and conversational with the people that work for you. Vision lives in dialogue, not just in a PowerPoint presentation. The irony of me having a PowerPoint presentation is not lost on me. But I do think if we kind of head towards the end of this, I want to start talking a little bit about the change that we need to make. If you've seen me present before, you'll have definitely seen this slide. I use it in pretty much every presentation. It's my favorite quote. We need to build the new with intent, inclusion, and make sure that we've got people that are being served by AI, not dictated to by technology. We've got to stop defending outdated systems, outdated processes, just because they're familiar, which I hear a lot. We need to kind of move away from that. This is kind of that call to lead, not just to change, but lead that change. Your employees are watching right now. They're watching for alignment between what your external-facing brand says and the actual reality of working in that organization. Trust builds belonging, belonging builds loyalty. And that's more than a culture issue. It is actually a retention issue for everybody here. And we need to get away from this old idea that everything is uniform, everything is clear, we have a strategy and it's going to be fine, and in 5 years' time, everything will go exactly the way we thought it would. Because it won't. We are now in the time where we have to align with our employees and lead with clarity, but accept the fact there is a degree of rapid change and potential chaos that we're going to have to deal with in our day-to-day work. But if we're clear, insightful, and purposeful with our employees, then we bring them on that journey, and hopefully we'll all achieve the goals that we want to. So, in summary, lead with clarity, move with purpose, and most of all, include all your people in the journey. As I said, the report can be found on this link here, which is really bad because we should have had a QR code on there, I think. If you'd like to come and find me at the end, I will happily provide you with that link, not a problem at all. If you can't speak to me, we do have the Indeed stand down in the middle of the field somewhere, and I'm sure some of our team there will be able to help you out. But thank you very much for your time today. I know it's been really hot in here, but I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me. Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you.
Take a bow. Matt! Thank you. Who started leading that happy birthday? That was awesome. I was going to do that, so thank you for doing that for me. Thank you so much, Matt. One of the purposes of today's stage was for us to have open and honest conversations, and I definitely think that that was an open and honest conversation and lots of food for thought. So now we have a very special section of our program today. We're actually going to be going into the Indeed Public Sector Networking Hour. So if you pop outside, you can see the Indeedians in their blue T-shirts. They'll be happy to have a chat, network, meet your peers, and we will be back here at 1:15 for our next session. Thank you.